So let's talk about being purposeful. This morning when I was listening to Spirit, and they weren't just my guides, I had a few crossed over beings as well. Everybody's just sort of chatting. And of course, I was there thinking, well, if you're going to be talking around me and over me and above me and inside me and, everywhere in this space that is me, then tell me, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about this? What is going on with it? What is the meaning of it? What is the purpose of it? And when I asked, I just got this feeling of being stared at as if I was the one who wasn't making sense. And of course, in my brain, that feeling verbalized itself as I was the one who wasn't making sense, when in fact I was sitting there thinking, you people are not making sense. And it realized, it sort of sunk in slowly, that I am very human in my desire for everything to make sense, for it to be sensible or meaningful or purposeful, that there must be something to it that makes it important enough that I should notice it or interact with it. And if it's just shooting the breeze, chatting, etc., then somebody must tell me in advance that that's what it is, so that I know now that the purpose is having fun, that the purpose is not a purpose. There's this crazy conversation going on this morning. And of course, when I had this feeling of everybody was just staring at me like, do you know what you're talking about? I felt a bit silly afterwards, because I wondered where that notion was coming from inside of myself. I am not conscious that I want everything in my life to be purposeful. I mean, I'm so not aware that everything has to have a purpose and everything has to be meaningful and everything has to fit into some sensible understanding of the world, especially when I'm the one who lives in crazy la-la land a lot of the time, in freak-me-out land most of the time. But on the flip side of that, I'm always reading the patterns of things. I'm always seeing how purpose evolves. And recently when Demir was reading Viktor Frankl's Will to Meaning?
Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning, in which he describes logotherapy as man's desire to create meaning around things, to find meaning in things, to even bring meaning to things from other things, to connect things with this act of making things meaningful. And that's what we're doing in our lives all the time, in order to run away from the notion, to hide from the fact that maybe everything is in fact meaningless. That nothing, that absolutely nothing has any meaning other than what we attach to it, place on it. That our own emotional attachments to something create a significance that then give our experiences dimensions, give our experiences value, and in turn give us as beings meaningfulness, dimensions, value. Now this is a big thing. It's a big thing, because if we start to unravel it and we stop and we say, okay, everything means nothing, what happens? The human ego gets paralyzed. Suddenly, it doesn't know what to do with itself. It doesn't know whether it should get up and go to a protest march tomorrow, because it's all meaningless, right? Why would you do that? Why would you pray? Why would you stand up and be counted? Why would you hold on to the truth? Why would you tell a lie if everything is ultimately meaningless? And we know how insignificant everything is by considering Earth and its position in an entire galaxy. We've talked about this. We've talked about the matrix of connectedness in this group. We've talked about how insignificant we are in all of creation, and in our insignificance, that we actively create meaning. We actively create purpose, as if it's a form of entertainment, as it is a way of defining life itself. The ego self must have something, some process, some dynamic, some way of making its presence on this plane and in any other sphere valid. If we cannot validate our existence with experience and meaning and concepts and constructs, then how will we ever know that our no-thingness, our nothingness in itself is valuable? Now this conversation, with all of its big words and its spiraling into itself and spiraling out of itself feeling, can in itself paralyze us. But in the midst of this conversation, where Spirit was talking across me and through me and above me, and I was actually feeling crowded by them this morning, I could hear my Lord's husband's voice saying, "But why are you talking about nothing as if it is in itself meaningless? Why are you thinking of nothing as if it is empty? Why are you thinking of nothing as if it is negative? Why are you not putting this nothing, this no-thingness, into the context of universal consciousness and seeing it, in fact, as oneness? And that oneness in and of itself is meaningful, to use a phrase that human beings require to pin it down on the earth frame. That this oneness consciousness that we are working towards is encompassed and embraced and actually created by no-thingness, because no-thingness is in the space of non-separation. No-thingness is the space of no distinction between self and others, self and God, self and the universe, where there are no criteria, there are no classifications, catalogs or categorizations, where even the angels do not have hierarchies. This is the space of no-thingness. This space of no-thingness that says, I do not have to rise to God, I am with God all the time. This space is a space where there is no development of self that is required, and there is no negation of self required to push you or inspire you into developing. This space of no-thingness that requires no meaning and no validation, because it is all that is. And again, I find the language so limiting, so containing and confining in order to explain this feeling of no-thingness, where if you expand your senses, you can hear an entire galaxy humming in the Om vibration and being full, so alive, so magnanimous of energy and spirit, that it feels like no nothing I have ever met before. And that oneness, that belonging, that togetherness is what we require to open the door for Marushan and to keep us all in our space of connectedness with each other. And what we forget every day of every moment, is that we are that no-thingness, that we are that bliss, that we are this immense energy that's flowing through everything. And almost every time we meet in the center, I am saying this and saying this and saying this. I'm talking about how our bodies work and how our brains work and how our emotions work and how our chakras work and how the energy system works. And I'm talking about our connectedness to everything. And in the midst of all of that talking, we are creating meaning out of the meaningless. We are creating attachments to things. We are creating definitions to things because we want meaning, because we want to say we have had this experience and that experience. So here, where we're sitting on a threshold of a moment in our lives in this country, which is a moment in history, and no doubt we will look back on it in 25 years' time and 30 years' time, and we'll say that was a moment, and we will have great rhetoric and we will have great speeches. Inside each of us, welcome Marushan, there is a moment in which we must stop and feel the oneness instead. Now, all those months ago when my guides were saying, you and Zuma are one, and I was wanting to vomit all over the place in sheer rejection of the notion, and I still cringe and shudder at the thought, only the thought, mind you, this oneness might actually be the way to shift everything. When I've been reading Facebook over the past week, and I have spent half my life on this system, talking to people and sharing information, I've listened to how human beings talk about each other and how they talk to each other, despite the fact that they are total strangers. There are some people who only come from the negative and only come from a space of wanting to deflate everybody else. And that is the meaning or the value they bring to their belonging, to their sharing, to their experiences. And then there are people who are open and transparent and uplifting and inspiring, and that is what they bring to it. And yet both sides are completely valid. Both sides are required. Both sides have a role to play. And both sides are actually ultimately on the same side, politically, economically in this country, patriotically in this country, and spiritually. As soul beings, they're all on the same side. So I'm listening to this and I'm watching this and I'm looking at this great variety of human beings and thoroughly enjoying all of it, and my 40 new very Afrikaner friends I might add, and discovering that I am in fact in all of them. The annoying, the irritating, the frustrating, the angry, the sardonic, the sarcastic, the I'm so sick and tired. I am in all of them. And on the flip side of that, all of the lovely people, I am in all of them as well. And I'm discovering that the separation of my intellect and the separation of my consciousness as emotion and my consciousness as physical body and my consciousness as my own desires and yearning become meaningless in the face of all of this connectedness. And my ego brain stutters and stammers in order to say I and mine and me, and it thankfully comes to a screeching halt in the face of all of this very limited view of humanity, I must admit, because not everybody is there having this conversation. But it comes to a stammering halt in this view of humanity and everything that's going on in the so-called mass consciousness of South Africa right now. So when I see all of the anguish and despair and the pain that's coming out of the ground, the pain that's coming out of people's bodies, the exhaustion that's coming out of people's bodies because they are breaking through the apathy, this zombie-like status that everybody was subscribing to so gleefully for so long, I find myself in that too. And it has been such a blessing. Because when I feel all of this, I remember this moment when I was driving from Umtata to Durban with Charmaine years ago. It's the first time ever we'd visited Fatima, and on the way back we're driving through the forest in Kokstad, and I have this bruised heart, and my Lord husband said, see me in everything. Hear me in the breeze. Feel me in the air on your skin, blowing in your face. See me in everything. There is nothing else that will lead you home faster than knowing that I am everything, that I am in everything and with everything, and that I am everything, and that with me you too are everything. The biggest conundrum and most profound moment of this life of mine is having to reach nothing, to become so completely immersed in that nothing, to let go of all of the barriers of separation, to feel that nothingness as everything. And if there's one thing that I would want to pray for, hope for, yearn for, and put into the mass consciousness of this country that I love calling home. And I do, because no matter which sacred space I go to, I always want to come home to my own sacred space here. So the one thing that I would want to leave behind as my own profound imprint in choosing to be South African and choosing to be here at this moment in our time of history, it would be this feeling of oneness, this feeling of non-separation, this feeling of seeing each other in each other, and in doing so, seeing the fullness of our beings as one, as God, as every possible frequency of light, as that buzz of the Om vibration as it flows through the universe. Martin Luther King probably said it a whole lot better than I do. But this must surely be something that ignites the human being and the human doing as we find our belonging with each other in every lifetime. Whether it's our belonging as a nation or our belonging as a community, our belonging in our sexuality and our belonging in our religion and our belonging in our culture and our belonging even in our academics and intellectual pursuits, in our vocations and in our passions and what we find meaningful in our lives. Even Van Gogh found belonging in the madhouse. We find our belonging wherever we place our meaning. We find our belonging wherever we create our meaning. And perhaps it is time for us to stop and see where it is we place our attention and our intention in finding meaning in our lives, in creating purpose. If our sum total of our purpose is to go to work and build a fence between us and everybody else to make a living, then that is not a purpose. That is a going through the motions, and we've had a meditation about that. So there must be something bigger. There must be something more that puts you in the context of who you truly are as soul, that puts you in the context of the grand no-thingness from which you have come and to which you return. The fullness of being lives there. It is that. And there is no better way to describe the absence of meaning, the absence of purpose, the absence of efficiency. So as a spiritual teacher, when I am talking to my students and I'm saying, stop multitasking, get focused, finish what you start, there's no need for procrastination, live this human life moment by moment, now by now, as fully as possible, because you are creating the next moment. And in this I encourage you to find meaning and purpose and passion and fulfillment and grace and joy and abundance. And why would I do that when it is all meaningless? Because all of those activities, all of those becomings, all of those achievements bring us closer and closer and closer, and one step closer to the feeling and the fulfillment of the no-thingness inside out. And unfortunately, we are beings who like to be processed. So we're a bit like the pasta that Lou is making always. You know, first we have to get kneaded into dough, and then we have to get put through the grinder, and we have to come out the other side in ribbons and shreds, separate from each other until he throws us all in the pot and into the sauce, and we're all in the same hot water, and then we connect to each other, and we come out looking tender. This pasta metaphor. But it's a good one. So today's meditation, not unlike Tuesday's meditation, which was about raising your vibration and raising your vibration and raising your vibration into pricelessness. Today's meditation is going to focus on going into no-thingness. Now, we've talked about this. We've talked about the gap. We've talked about getting so deep inside of yourself, so into your own zone, that sacred space in you feel no restriction, feel no limitations on self or from self, and feel no inhibitions to being connected to everything outside self, because there is no vulnerability in soul. For those of you who believe in God, find it there. If you don't believe in God, find it there. however you find it there, whatever your belief system, that moment of fulfillment, that moment of feeling connected to everything else, whether you call it God or not, is not my business. I call it God. I call it Shiva. I call it Lord Husband. I call it Spirit. That's my name for it. That's my word for it in the absence of something more magnificent and more descriptive than I can actually bring into being with this limited language. Yes, I don't know how to describe it otherwise. Hate words sometimes. So what we want is for you to go into a space, and all I'm going to do is count. I'm going to keep you counting. I'm going to keep and hold the space. If you fall off to sleep and you transcend out of yourself, that's fine. If you fall off to sleep and you snore, I'm going to come and kick you in the shin and wake you up to get started again. Fair warning. And if you do this tomorrow as a way of sending out healing into an entire universe, never mind just South Africa, because God knows all the atrocities that are happening all over in the world right now. Oh my God, yes. Let us not forget. And never mind all the climate change that's happening in the world right now. These are in fact the best of times and the worst of times. And each of us, as the spiritual warriors we've been training to be for the past 6 months, are in a position to do something meaningful